Hello, everyone. Very warm welcome to the second part of the talk entitled The Identity of God. And today we will be going through a number of titles that Baba has. And Sister Denise thought it would be a good idea if we go into the depths of these titles, because although we know the words, we don't necessarily know the depth and the meaning that they carry. So this is part 2 of the identity of God, and we are very happy to have all of you present today. Okay, Sister Denise, very, very warm welcome.
Thank you so much for your introduction. And this is a very deep subject, the whole matter of knowing God and the identity of God. In Raj Yoga, it is said that you know someone according to what you know about that one. And the titles of God are very good avenues to enable us to enter into knowing God. If you compare that with the way people think about God in terms of the different religions, and I think that the majority of people on EGY probably come from a Judeo-Christian background. And in that religion, it is said, well, you have to have faith. And what do they say about God? Not too much. Whereas in Raj Yoga, you have a lot of information about God, which enables you to think about God. If you want to know a human being, the first thing you like to have is a picture of their face. And when you meet a person face to face, then you register their face, you register their name, and then you start talking to them to find out more and more about them. Then you start to interact with them, and gradually over a pretty long period of time, you come to know them by your interaction with them and by observing them. Now, this is not possible with God because God is incorporeal. So the first thing you have to know about God is that he is incorporeal. And then people say, well, why do you say he? And in the English language, he is a generic term for he and she, but then the work of the feminists has said, no, that's not a good generic term. We can't work with that. We can't say it, we can't say he, we can't say she, but we end up saying he because this distinguishes that God is an individual, a being. And there are many people who say, well, God is everywhere and everything, which means that it's not an individual. And so gradually, I think the very important aspect of our study of Raj Yoga is we have a long list of points which tell you what God is and what God isn't. Then comes the question, where is God? And what does God do? So all of these things are given in Raj Yoga. And what is Raj Yoga? It is a study that is actually taught by God. So for all of us who have become Brahmins, we became Brahmins on the basis of recognition. So this is the one thing that Baba gives a lot of importance to, regardless of a person's behavior or character or level of intelligence or goodness or badness. He is very interested in those who recognize him. And how did we recognize him? It's really a combination of the feeling when we began to meditate, and the information that we received when we started learning about this. And this is the key. Why I felt it was really important to take up the question of the identity of God is because most of the people, when they meditate, or these meditation commentaries that many people create, they're more concerned with relaxation. Actually, Raj Yoga has no connection with relaxation whatsoever. Peace is different from relaxation. And the word Shanti actually has three meanings in English. Shanti means peace, definitely. It means immobility, and it means silence. And this term peace is not really to be considered in a physical way, although most people do consider it in a physical way. These attributes of God, peace, purity, power, love, bliss, these are attributes of God. They're also attributes of the soul. And recognizing God is very much connected with recognizing the self as a soul, recognizing the self as incorporeal. And I think a problem that people have is that they actually don't make themselves soul conscious as a first step, and then connect with God in soul consciousness as a second step. And because of that, everything remains on the physical level. You see, relaxation is a physical thing, and internal quiet, when you are disconnected from your body, is quite different from relaxation. So this is something that I give a lot of importance to, because I think that most people have forgotten that Raj Yoga is completely different from what I might call New Age activities, because those are all completely physical. And what we're doing is all about the dimension that is non-physical and the interaction for us in the physical and the non-physical. So the first identity of ourselves and the first identity of God is that neither are we physical, nor is God physical. So this is first and most important step. Then comes the matter of perception, because you cannot really meditate unless you know enough about God to be able to perceive God using your third eye. The third eye is something that he is famous for giving. So when we were talking about the titles of God, a very key and important element of that is that God is the giver of the third eye. And the third eye is the capacity of a human being to perceive something which is not physical. And that means it's not about perceiving something, but someone, because anything that's a thing can be perceived through the sense organs. You can see it, you can touch it, you can measure it, you can weigh it, etc. And the world of religion and the world of science, both of these worlds deal exclusively with matter and the material thing. Even though the religions talk about things which are beyond matter, but they don't really have access. So because of that, I would say, and my observation is that they remain totally on the level of matter, and they don't have the third eye. So recognition of God, which is what makes a person a Brahmin, fundamentally, you recognize God, and you recognize God through Brahma. How you recognize God through Brahma is not just through drishti, because drishti will give you a nice feeling, but feelings are ephemeral. They are there for a little while and then they go away. And what is better for us is to recognize God on the basis of the knowledge that he gives us. And so the function of Brahma Baba is to be the physical instrument through which Shiv Baba introduces himself to us. And he says, I am the Supreme Soul. I am incorporeal, and I am the father of all souls. All souls. That means including the Brahmins, including the Hindus, the Buddhists, the Muslims, the Jews, the Christians, etc. All souls, all of humanity. And I can be accessed through knowledge, primarily. And one of the things that you also hear in the Murli, and it's also there written clearly in the Bhagavad Gita, is that God loves the knowledgeable soul. So knowledgeable soul means a soul who has understood the knowledge and has understood God through the knowledge. Because once you've understood God through the knowledge doesn't change. Feelings change. They last for a few seconds. And I think one of the problems of many BKs is that they think if they have a nice feeling, they made contact with Shiv Baba, and if they don't have a nice feeling, then they didn't make contact with Shiv Baba. And then they think that meditation is a feeling, but in fact, it's an activity. So meditation means to focus your attention on God as he is. And you know, you must have heard this many times. He says, there are very few who know me as I actually am. And that means he uses the word to know. He doesn't very often, if ever, use the word to feel. BKs use the word to feel all the time. But Baba says, do you know me? Can you perceive me as a result of knowing me? Do you know how to operate both in the material world and beyond the material world? Do you know what it means to bring yourself into soul consciousness? So one of the titles of God, which I think is very helpful for this, is he is called Trilokinath in Hindi. Trilokinath, you probably have heard this word many times. Trilokinath means the Lord of the three worlds. That means that he knows very well the material world, the subtle world, and the incorporeal world. And he enables us to also understand the incorporeal world, the subtle world, and the physical world. And he tells us the subtle world is powered by the mind. And the subtle world also is the place where you can perceive the subtle body and various images and symbols and representations that are an interface between the corporeal and the incorporeal. And in the early days of the yagya, there were many visions. And a lot of people experienced a call from Shiv Baba through a vision, sometimes through dreams. And dreams are also, in many ways, part of the subtle world. Now, the incorporeal world, there's absolutely nothing there whatsoever. So you cannot perceive it through your mind or through your sense organs, but you can understand it. So this Raj Yoga is also called Gyan Yoga. So Gyan Yoga means yoga of the knowledge, or yoga of knowledge. Then he talks to us about the intellect and the mind. So the intellect is capable of comprehending information and processing information, whether it is to do with some physical object or it is completely abstract. And the mind is to do with feelings, and the mind also is very comfortable with symbolism and metaphor. And so the images that we have created, all the BK pictures, most of it is metaphorical. And one of the difficulties that we have to deal with is that a lot of people consider the metaphor to be a reality, and the metaphor is not a reality. It's a representation of an abstract reality. And so some people's minds and intellects can deal with these abstract things and others cannot. So sometimes Baba talks about a difference between a Tamil Pradhan intellect, a Rajasik intellect, and a Sattvic intellect. So the Tamasic intellect is only able to deal with physical objects and cannot deal with metaphor and cannot deal with the abstract. And that's just the way it is. And the overwhelming majority of the human race has Tamil Pradhan intellect. And so, okay. And Shiv Baba's very aware about that. And this is one of the reasons why he creates lots of images, so that people can latch on to those images and that they can have a relationship with him on the basis of those images. But of course, it's an indirect relationship because they're still unable to come out of the physical dimension. And that's just the way it is. So therefore, their yoga is very much connected with belief rather than actually knowing. And so it is. And Baba says everyone is number wise. The Rajasic intellect, according to Brother Jagdish, refers to people who have an intellect that can handle abstract concepts. So this refers to philosophical type of approach. And I think what we have in the physical world, which helps us to make contact with the incorporeal world, is mathematics and music. Anyway, music is very mathematical. And mathematics pulls us into the abstract, and then music combines the abstract intellectual with resonance, sound vibrations, a language that carries you to a transcendent state, and therefore it's really very valuable. And in BK equipment, you can say we have tons and tons of songs, but very few of them actually carry you to a transcendent state. And the early songs that were created were much more connected with the transcendent state than the current ones, which are very, very much in the material world, but that's okay. So to understand Shiv Baba, to know Shiv Baba, he gives us study. And he says, now meditation means that you think very, very deeply in the manner that I'm telling you about me. He says, I want you to remain in my remembrance, because by doing that, your negative karma will be burnt. And this statement is quite difficult for people to figure out. And the reason they think about it with difficulty is because religions talk about sins. And they think that sins are things that you do which require you to be punished. And so they can't understand how that has to do with sins getting burnt, or how sitting in meditation will burn your sins. So they will accept the idea, but they won't really understand it. So I think to understand God, we also need to understand how he works and what he does. So one of the titles of God is the purifier. And he talks to us in the Murlis a great deal about how the contact between the soul and God, if it is sustained, will burn your negative karma. And he also lets us know that negative karma takes the form of weight on the soul. It's a heaviness, and it's a pressure, and also it is an energy that forces you to repeat the negative karma. So in Gyan, which is also there in Hinduism, but not quite as clearly, but which is not there at all in the Judeo-Christian, Abrahamic religions, and also not in Buddhism. But in Gyan, Baba says the sin is not the actual thing that you did, but it's the tendency to do it again. And this tendency to do it again is what you're dealing with, because something that happened in the past was finished. If you did a negative karma, as you know about the philosophy of karma, there will be an equal and opposite return, and you will experience some negative circumstance or situation that you have to deal with. And what he says is that yoga gives you an accumulation of spiritual power that you can use to manage the negative consequences of your negative karma, so that your suffering is substantially reduced, because you have the power to manage it and get through it with minimum suffering. When a person doesn't have that power, then the pressure to do that negative karma, or an associated negative karma, or a reaction to the negative consequence, this is called the sin, because it makes you do something again. So that instead of handling the consequence of the negative karma, you increase your negative karma, and then you have to pay more. So he says, you don't have to be in a situation like that, because when you have contact with me, you draw power into yourself. So what we need is to know his identity. We need to know how to connect with him in such a way that we can draw the power. And this requires concentration. And the intensity and quality of concentration that we are able to acquire and sustain is what yoga is. And there's nothing relaxing about it. It takes a lot of power to make contact with God. And the progression of our meditation is met with an increasing amount of resistance. And not everybody is quite aware about that. When you want to focus on God at the very beginning, it's very easy. There's very little resistance. And people have made an assumption, BKs have made an assumption that the more you try, the more you will succeed, and you will get better and better, and it will become easy Raj Yoga. And then when they're really honest with themselves, they find that it's not like that at all. And then they don't want to talk about that because somebody will say, well, you're not doing it right. But that's not really the case. What Baba has said, but which not everybody pays attention to, is that as you move forward in your practice of Raj Yoga, the amount of resistance that you will encounter will increase with time. And you probably remember this sentence, that the more strongly you focus on Baba, the more strongly Maya will oppose you. And so the nature of the positioning between yourself and God, wanting to be in yoga and hold yourself in yoga and draw power into you, is met by resistance from Maya, because this process of connecting with God actually destroys Maya, and Maya doesn't want to be destroyed. So there is a question of victory. Sometimes he says to us, I mean, there are his titles and then there are our titles. So one of our titles is that we are spiritual warriors, and we have a war against Maya. And then what is Maya? It's not a she, Ravan is not a he. In terms of Hindu iconography, there are pictures of Ravan as a male, and there are no pictures of Maya as a female. And yet a lot of BKs use the word she for Maya. And partly it is because in Indian tradition, the word Maya is used for a woman's name. And so then they extrapolate it into Maya as some kind of feminine negative energy, and Ravan is some kind of masculine negative energy. But that is not true, and I would call it body consciousness. So we need to be much more subtle to also distinguish between the enormous magnetic power of Maya or Ravan. Then there is another enormous magnetic power, which is the magnetic power of matter. Then there is a third magnetic power, which is the magnetic power of our negative karma. So 3 magnetic powers that we have to resist. And then Shiv Baba calls himself a magnet. This is also one of his titles. I am the magnet. And when the needle of the soul is clean, then it is easily pulled to the magnet. However, the more we move forward in our spiritual practice, the more corrosion appears on the needle. corrosion in physical sense comes from oxidization, which is something that comes from the outside, but the corrosion of the soul comes from the inside. So it's a bit different. So the analogy is okay to a certain extent, but not totally. So this corrosion from the inside is connected with yoga. So we focus in yoga on incorporeal God in our incorporeal state. And this creates fire. And the analogy that Baba gives for this process is that if you want to set fire to a piece of paper on a sunny day, you put a lens between the paper and the sun, and the focal point of the lens, make that at its sharpest point on the piece of paper, and the lens focuses the sun rays and the piece of paper catches fire. So he says this is an analogy for how you should do yoga. So your intellect, when it becomes focused on God, functions like that lens, and you cause the rays of Shiv Baba to be focused on your soul, and it causes the corrosion in the soul, the corruption, the negative karma, the poison, whatever other analogies you like, to come to the surface. And then this constitutes a resistance to God, and it also creates another effect for which there's another analogy. One of the titles of God is in Hindi, Vaidyanath. So Vaidyanath means that he is the healer. And the healer, the Ayurvedic healer, is one who gives medicine which causes the hidden disease, which is very deeply buried inside, to come to the surface and then come out. So meditation has this effect too, that when you are meditating by focusing very precisely with yourself in the form of a point, focusing on Shiv Baba as a point, and you are disconnecting your attention from the material world and focusing deeply inside and then beyond, because you are deeply inside and he is beyond, then you create this something resembling a laser beam. And this laser beam acts on your subconscious, because your subconscious is where your sins are, and that's why you don't know about them, because they're subconscious. So his function is, through this very focused meditation, to cause everything that's buried in your subconscious to come to the surface. That means it comes into your conscious mind from your subconscious. And that means you become aware of your demons. Now, a lot of BKs think that once they start becoming aware of their demons, it means that's a bad meditation, but actually it means it's a good meditation, a very good meditation, because this is what you want. You want your demons to come to the surface so that you can shoot them down and destroy them. And so you need to also know very well that that's what's going on. And the purpose of your demons coming up is not for you to say, ooh, I'm a demonic BK, or I have this or that Maya. No, that's completely wrong. You understand that this is something in my subconscious, some kind of negativity, some sort of leftover trauma, whatever it is, comes to the surface so that you can use the knowledge to neutralize it and then it vaporizes. But a lot of BKs do it backwards, and then they think that it means they are no good and blah, 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 and they're having bad meditation and lots of Maya. No, that is exactly what yoga is supposed to be. And why do people have a negative reaction when Shiv Baba pulls their negativity to the conscious mind for the purpose of letting it come totally out, is because they don't understand. And why they don't understand is because they have not been informed. And so that is important, to be informed about this so that you know what's going on, that you know what you're doing. And then you just do it. Because this is what meditation is all about. It's a purging process, a purification process. So this is why he's called the purifier, and he's called Vaidyanath, the Ayurvedic healer. And once all of your junk is out, then you are lighter. And your tendency to repeat those things is removed.
Denise, as you were speaking about Baba in such a soft way, it wasn't just your words, it was so experiential, listening to you talk about him like that. So you have mentioned a few titles, but I just want to go through our list. Antaryami, the one who knows everything from within. And Denise, as he mentions that title, the other one that comes to mind is Jani Jananha, right? So do you explain these two titles in relation to each other and in relation to us?
Yeah, and I think that along with Antaryami and Jani Jananhar, there are some others that are absolutely connected with that, which I think we might want to include as well. And that is this word omniscient. And Antaryami literally means he knows from within. And people generally interpret this word to mean that he knows what is going on inside you. That's how they interpret that word. But I interpret it differently. And I interpret it that he's saying that you know things by perceiving them through your sense organs, and those things are on the outside of you because you function in the material world, whereas I do not. I am incorporeal, and I know things from inside me. And he knows the totality of the drama. Now, one thing we need to understand is that he is not a human. And one of the big, I would say, failings of human philosophers and theologists is the anthropomorphization of God, which means that they discuss God, talk about God, think about God as if God is a human. Because a human being cannot comprehend or conceptualize a being who is of a higher order than a human being. It's impossible. But actually, God is of a completely higher order than a human being. And he talks to us about how he knows things so that we can get past the limitations of our ability to know things only via sense perception. And sense perception involves two kinds of senses. One is you sense, physical things through your five senses. And the other is you sense subtle things. And those subtle things are things like atmosphere and dreams and feelings and different kinds of very subtle experiences that you cannot perceive through your physical senses. But all of those, physical or subtle, are still in the dimension of physical. And you still know them because you are connected with your body and you know them through your body. Whereas Shiv Baba is incorporeal and everything that he knows is on the inside of his soul. And so he is called permanently soul conscious. And what is said in India, which I think is quite relevant to this, is that nobody knows the creator and the creation. And he says, I am giving you the knowledge of the creator and the creation. That means he's telling us exactly and precisely who he is, how he functions, what his intelligence is like, what is contained in his intelligence. And contained within him, he calls it sometimes, inside me are the sanskaras of knowledge. Inside you are the sanskaras of your role. So you play your role, and that's a human being. A human being plays a role, interacts with various people, has a minimum of 1 birth and a maximum of 84 births, and goes through gold, silver, copper, and iron stages and gets progressively worn out and impure. Shiv Baba is not like that at all. And so he knows the progression from gold and silver, copper to iron. He knows Sato, Rajo, Tamo. He knows, and he tells us sometimes, he has the capacity to see what's going on in any single one of us within seconds. He can see and know what's happening to all of us instantaneously because he knows us. And he is able to move into the drama, and who he looks at mostly as BKs, that's his children. Then he also looks at a few other people, see what they're doing. But he moves with the speed of thought. Now, a human being can't do that. A human being cannot just access any thought of any person anywhere in the world, anytime, and reach everyone with that speed of thought. And of course, God's speed of thought is much faster than a normal human speed of thought. So we need to really comprehend the difference between a human and someone who is of a totally different order, very, very much higher than a human being, who operates very differently and who is focused on humanity because he's alone. There is nobody else on his level. He says, you have each other, I have you, I only have you. And so he's very, very interested in those who can recognize him because there's communication. The devotees communicate to God, but without making contact. It's a sort of maybe one-way prayer and supplication and arguments and things. Whereas someone who knows Baba and is able to make contact, they can really appreciate him and work with him. And so he likes people who can recognize him very much, because I don't think we can say that he's lonely, but he's definitely alone. And he's someone, and he's all the time able to feel what humanity is going through, what humanity is feeling. So, for example, we know about a few things that come in the media, like the war in Ukraine and the trouble in Yemen and all the various dramas that are happening, whatever the media tells us. But there are all sorts of other things that the media does not tell us. But God will feel those things. And so when you understand that, you also have to understand the incredibly great capacity to empathize with human suffering that he has. And that his main focus in that regard is to get us to take energy from him and dispense it to the people of the world who are suffering, which is an increasing number of people. So he knows the process of the drama, the length of the drama, who the actors are, what their motivations are. All of these things he knows. And at the same time, he knows that it's predestined, including all the suffering that everyone is going through. He knows that it's all to do with their karma as well as their destiny. And there are a lot of different layers that are operating together. He's aware of all those layers, and he does what he has to do, but he doesn't do anything against the laws of nature. That's one very important element about him. But when a person is connected with him with sincerity, that connectivity allows him to send energy to relieve them of their extreme distress. And he also knows the spiritual law, which says that you only really turn to God when everything else fails. And I've also seen this in some of the reporting that is there about the war in Ukraine, that only when people have just lost everything and everything's gone and they have no hope, then they start to say, no, it's in God's hands. There's nothing we can do. So this spiritual law is getting visible more and more because of all these problems and distress that people are having. And he has to bear it. You know, we receive the power of tolerance, the power of accommodation, all these different powers, but he has these powers to the fullest extent. And only somebody who has the power to bear human suffering and relieve human suffering and purify people of their weight of the negative energy that they have absorbed, you see, because for him, sin is not only bad things that you have done, but also bad things that other people have done to you, does the same damage to you as if you had done something bad to someone. And people don't know this. They really don't know. So we need to understand more and more who he is, how he is, what he does, what he knows, and also that the only time in which we can know this knowledge is at the end of the cycle, because otherwise it's not possible for us to bear. He has to know these things from the beginning through the middle to the end and observe it and be with those who are with him. He is reciprocal. So when somebody expresses their love for God, that makes it possible for him to respond so that they can feel his love for them. But people don't understand this reciprocal nature of God, even though among human beings, reciprocity is just part of the question of human relationships. So his Jani Jananhar is another word for he knows everything. Omniscient is another word for he knows everything, but people don't understand what exactly is the everything that he knows, and they will interpret it according to their convenience. For example, sometimes he says in the Murli, you say, I know everything, therefore you don't have to be honest. That's faulty logic. You know, he knows everything doesn't mean you don't have to be honest. He knows everything, so tell him. And if you lie, he will know that too. And don't think that you can deceive God. But they use this faulty logic to I think to amplify their arrogance. I think let's do one more title and then we can take questions.
Okay. I'm going to go with my favorite, which is Akarta, Asochta, and Abokta.
Well, that's a really wonderful one. I'm very glad that you took that one up, because it is so difficult for people to figure out what that means. So Akarta means he is not someone who acts in the way that we act. It doesn't mean he doesn't act. Asochta means he's not someone who thinks, where thinking means trying to figure something out or trying to make a decision and doing that kind of inner work to arrive at a conclusion. And abhokta is usually translated as he doesn't experience the result of anything, but it's not, I think, a very good way of putting it. Abhokta means that he doesn't get any consequence of good or bad action. So normally what a human being says, well, if he doesn't do anything, then nothing's going to happen to him. So they handle it that way. And if he doesn't do anything, that includes not thinking, because thinking is also an action. So that means he doesn't do anything, which means he's not a being, he's a thing. So again, this faulty logic comes in, and people use it to sort of avoid doing the real work that they need to do in terms of thinking about who is God and what is their relationship with God. So when he says asochta, akarta, abhokta, it gives us the possibility to make a comparison between how we operate and how he operates, because it is needed for us to be able to grasp who he is. And one of the ways in which he teaches is by comparing and contrasting things that are different from each other, like day and night, for example. So a human being, a human soul, is all the time doing karma and all the time trying to do something for personal benefit. And that is the internal motive. And because people haven't understood it too well, they all the time are doing things that become negative karma, mostly because of body consciousness. And their thinking is based on insufficient information, sense perception, and getting deluded and misinterpreting things and not thinking things clearly. And then they get all kinds of consequences, and they're motivated by desire to gain and they don't like it when they lose. So this is a human being. And whereas God is not like that at all. God is someone who is outside the machinery of the process of birth and rebirth. So I think also the title of him being beyond birth and rebirth and remaining always outside the cycle is relevant to this. He does come one time. There is definitely an incarnation of God, but he doesn't have his own body, which means he doesn't have a mother, which means he doesn't receive any sustenance, which means he doesn't come into any kind of obligation as a child comes into obligation to their mother and father who sustain them. Then the child, when the child grows older, has to give the return of that sustenance. So that is the reciprocal nature of human family life and birth and parents and children and all this. And he says, I am your father. And when he takes birth in an adult body, which he doesn't stay in all the time. He just uses according to when he wants to speak. And sometimes he uses when he wants to give drishti, and that means send energy to someone through the eyes. He says that my inheritance for you is the knowledge, and your problem is you don't have any knowledge, or the knowledge that you have is all upside down and backwards, and so it's unusable. But I give you the knowledge of who you are and who I am, and the knowledge of the creation. And when you have that, then you are able to become like God. So if you want to become like God, then think about what you're doing, think about what you're thinking, and think about what's happening to you, because these three things, karna, sochna, and bhogana, means you're doing something, you're thinking something, and something is happening to you. So if you want to become like God, it means you become something like neutral in regard to what to do. So he gives Shrimat, and Shrimat is instruction about how to conduct yourself. That's part of Shrimat. And so he says, okay, you have a role to play. You have to understand the laws of spirituality and play your role according to that, not according to conventional morality, because if you do that, you'll get into bondage. And if you do according to Shrimat, you will remain free. So all of this information that he gives us allows us to have a free mind. So when people are thinking, they think things like, what if only, and they spend a great deal of time worrying and regretting and repenting and all of this sort of thing. And you probably heard from Mama this expression, have a plain mind. That means keep your mind quiet, whatever is going on, whatever has happened, be the detached observer, so that, okay, it happened, so that's it, it's in the drama. Now be in the present moment and don't think about the past or the future, but just be there and respond to what is happening, so that what you do is just coming naturally from your soul, in contact with Shiv Baba, remembering Shrimat, and act according to your essence, and that will be pure karma. Then abhokta. Abhokta for us means that, well, for him, as I told earlier, he can bear human suffering, the totality of it. without it doing anything to him or giving him suffering or upsetting him or all of the various things the religions say. God will get angry, God will get upset, God will not like this. Nothing like that. He's quite stable in the face of all the things. And he wants us to become like that too. And the only way that we can become like that is by taking power from him. Because the ability to bear human suffering, whether it's other people's suffering or our own suffering, depends upon how much power we have taken in. It could be physical suffering, it could be mental, psychological, financial, any kind of distress that people have. They need power to be able to manage it, because the body influences the soul totally. Whereas Shiv Baba is not influenced by sense perception. He's not influenced by other people's suffering. He remains who he is. And basically, he persists in a state of bliss. And he knows what's going on. And he's powerful enough to remain blissful even when all these things are happening, and that is beyond human comprehension. But yet he says, no, understand this, because the more you understand how I am and who I am, the more you can become like me. But you need power for that, so you have to take power from me.
Sister Denise, I think we should start with the questions. There's a few of them. The first one is, it is very painful to feel what comes out. This is in relation to what you said at the commencement of today's talk. It is very painful to feel what comes out. What can you do in those moments? Sometimes it is as if you were torn inside.
Yeah, well, exactly. Of course it is. And you need to understand about pain. So understanding about pain means, first of all, don't resist it, because the more you resist pain, the more the intensity of the pain will increase. So pain is it's something, it's an energy that has to pass through you. And if you resist it, it can't pass through you. So you have to open yourself and become completely like water so that it can pass through you. It is similar to electricity, like a bolt of lightning. If a bolt of lightning passes through you, you'll get burned up, of course. But if you are completely unresistant and just open and relaxed and allowing it to go through and not thinking anything about it, like it's bad or it's awful or it's unbearable or whatever, that's resistance. So it takes a step of courage to allow that tearing to take place, because it has to come out, and it, you know, the only way out is through. I don't know if you know this expression, but that's the thing. So you have to go through whatever your stuff is, and the negative energy has to come through you in order to get out. So my experience of all this is just be completely open. And the thing that causes you to fight against pain more than anything is your ego. So one of the things that happens when you are totally open like that is that it carries off your ego as well, and you can come to the egoless stage more rapidly. So all of that is the benefit of pain. If you think that pain is a bad thing and you have to fight it, it will fight you with greater power than you have to fight it, and that will be very, very terrible. But if you make friends with it and allow it to do its work, because you need it to do its work, then you will be victorious.
Someone wants you to go through the idea of reciprocity with God again. Could you repeat, please?
Yes. Reciprocity means, there's an expression that he uses, love begets love. So you have to really show your love to God so that he's able to really show his love to you. A lot of people say, oh, God loves everybody equally. And they just make that as a kind of statement, and then they don't think about it. But you will not know the love of God unless you do what is necessary for you to be able to feel the love of God, because if you can't feel it, you don't know it's there. So this is why reciprocity is a very important thing to understand about. If you, if you study his knowledge with a lot of interest, then he will open up your intellect more so that you can understand more and more deeply. If you do his service very genuinely and unselfishly, he will open up more opportunities for you, and you will feel that he is with you when you're doing different work. And all of this is this reciprocity. This is why he says, have all relationships with me, because as soon as you start to try to take support, emotional support, whatever, from anyone, then he says, okay, well, you don't need me, so he'll go away. And then you're dealing with your karmic account with someone who you're taking support from. But if you make yourself completely free and independent and don't take emotional support, even physical support from anyone, and you have this sense that, no, I live with God. God is my support, my friend, my guide, all of these things. So that means that you're opening up the way for him to fulfill his side of the relationship, which is exactly what you need. I mean, everyone comes to Gyan dysfunctional to a greater or lesser extent, and having a lot of wounds in their heart and soul and everywhere. And when you have this full relationship with him, then he's able to heal your wounds through that reciprocity. And so it's very, very valuable to do that. And even though all sorts of people might try to get you involved with them through, offering you this or that, you need to understand that that is not in your interest to do that. Instead of have your relationships with God. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't go to the doctor and you shouldn't go to the grocery store and all of these things. He says you have to look after yourself, but you also need to understand the difference between taking support from God and having your all relationships with God and pushing God aside and getting involved with someone where you don't need to, because it puts you into a karmic bondage. So this is a very subtle aspect of knowledge that people really need to understand, and which is not so easy to understand.
The next question is, you'll become aware of your demons so you can shoot them down in the Ayurvedic part. So how to shoot them down?
How to shoot them down? Well, one of the things that we have is the image of Vishnu. And one of Vishnu's weapons is a mace. So in BK, they hardly ever talk about the mace and how to use it, because it's a weapon. And it's a weapon of violence. Not that you're going to be using that mace against any people, because we are non-violent people, but you need to use your weapon against these demons. And so when the demons come up, you have to knock them out. And that means metaphorically that you don't just sort of invite them in, and you don't just say, oh, yes, come along and make me miserable, come and make me insane. No, defend yourself, stand up for yourself, assert yourself, and do not allow yourself to assume that if some demon is coming at you, that you are automatically a victim. Do not allow yourself to be a victim in any way, either of people or of demons from the inside, or circumstances or people who try to make you believe that you can't look after yourself, or you're not capable, or you're weak, or any of that stuff. That's propaganda. And so you just face that and take it down in whatever way you can. You can create all kinds of metaphorical Kalashnikovs to shoot them down with that, if you like that better. But it's all going on in the mind, and it's all about you asserting that you are pure, you are okay, you are fine, and whatever the demon is, have a nice day and get out of here, and see you next kalpa.
Someone wants to know, how does God's thoughts arise?
He says, I am the creator, director, and the main actor in this drama. And I think that whatever is needed in the drama, it will spontaneously arise in his mind. Sometimes he says in the Murli that I will say in the Murli what was said in the last kalpa, that I will say in this kalpa, and I won't say it too early or too late. It's like he's so in tune with the drama and in sync with it that this resonance between God and the drama is perfect. And I think also when he wants us to become like him, he wants us to also come in resonance with the drama and do what is needed in the drama and feel it. So that means you have to have a very good intuition to be able to feel the need of the drama. And for that, you have to be desireless, because a person who has desires will put their desires ahead of what is needed by the time. And of course, God doesn't have any desires as such. And he teaches us to be like that too. He knows who he is. We have to know who we are. He knows what is the right thing. We have to know what is the right thing. And the more we have good yoga resonance with him, the more we will feel intuitively what's the right thing to do, to think, to feel, to be moment by moment. I think it's something like that.
Earlier, you described meditation as an activity. And the question from Hamburg is, what aspects does this activity have?
Well, you have to think, you have to churn. Meditation means churning the knowledge and practicing different states, which means you have to think about them, imagine them, and try out different things, experiment with yoga. These are activities. You know, you're not just sitting there like a bowl waiting for the rainwater to fall into it. No, you know, there are moments where you really do the work of churning, and you arrive. I often make mention of what is called the 4 stages of yoga, of initiation, meditation, concentration, and realization. And the realization stage is when you have arrived at the destination, you open up to Baba, and all the energy and different pure feelings flow in. And that means you have arrived.
Someone wants to know, God is from a higher order. Could we then say that he is personal and impersonal source at the same time?
No.
Okay.
People use the word impersonal, they mean omnipresent. You can't be someone and no one at the same time. You can't be somewhere and everywhere at the same time. He's fast, but it doesn't mean he is present at all places, at all times. That's a human idea, which he says is incorrect. That's not how he is. You know, in Christianity, they use this expression immanent and transcendent, which is just another word for omnipresent.
The next question is in the Murlis, Baba says that people are orphans because they do not know their Lord and Master. Are these titles the same?
Well, it's a translation problem, that one. In Indian society, the only protection a person has is from their parent, or if you're a woman, from your father, your husband, or your son. There's no other protection that you have according to the social system. So taking that, he says that if you do not know me, then you are as if you don't have me. So that's what makes you an orphan. But Lord and Master is an incorrect and inappropriate translation for Dhani. Dhani means provider, not Lord and Master. So can't do anything about the translator's insistence on keeping that expression, but it's really not good.
This is a question from the Murli of the 1st of April. Baba said there have to be scriptures on the path of devotion. The scripture of the deity religion is the Gita. There is no scripture of the Brahmin religion. Please explain these points and clarify the origin and the main contents of the Gita, which Baba often said in the Murli. I don't think we've got time for this answer.
Yeah, it's quite simple. When he says the Gita is the scripture of the deity religion, it means that what he told us in the confluence age is what enables the deity, which is not a religion, but a dharma. It enables that to persist. And the Brahmin life, you have lots and lots of murlis, which are all a big pile of murlis, and we hear the last 5 years of them, but they're not all collected into a book, even though there are lots of people who try and collect them all into a book. But it's basically, if you study the murli of 3 months, you will get everything in that 3 months. And but we still listen every day, and he keeps talking. And at the time when he was talking, then there was still more to come. Now he's not talking anymore, so we say we have everything. But that's really the difference. And then the Gita that they have on the path of bhakti is how people remembered. In the Copper Age, there was a big flood of memory of what the fact that there was Baba and what he had told. And then the Gita that you get in the shops is the Gita that the Shankaracharyas had changed and altered the material so that it corresponded with their notions of omnipresence and stuff like that. And the Gita that you can buy in the shop is filled with contradictions and non sequiturs and things like that, which indicates that it was put together by a number of different people. So it's called an eponymous scripture. But so you have, on one hand, Baba's talking about the effect of the murlis for the deity dharma, the murlis themselves, and the Brahman, and then the Gita that you can buy, which is called the false Gita. So he wouldn't call that the Gita, he'd call that someone's scripture or philosophy, which is incorrect.
There's many titles that was on our list that we didn't cover today. I think you should consider doing the Identity of God Part 3.
Ah, yes, why not? Okay, that's a great idea. Thank you very much. And
Thank you.
this is